love people who are rolling up their sleeves, getting busy. So before we get into the story behind how you ended up in front of that monument that was coming down, tell me how you got involved. What was your entry point to actually saying, I don't want to be on the sidelines. I want to actually make a difference in my community?
I always credit the murder of Trayvon Martin as my waking point. I had spent 10 years in DC. I worked for the Navy. I was like your average DC Black person during Obama. I went to work, I went to happy hour, rinse, wash, repeat. That was CBC was my jam. That was my life. And when Trayvon Martin got killed, it really started to make me stop and wonder, what was I doing? What was my legacy? Realizing that the things my parents and ancestors fought for still needed people to fight for them. And I came back home to Memphis and hit the ground running.
We were talking before you got here. Today is Jefferson Davis Day in Alabama, which which is like, are you, it's 2021. Y'all seriously celebrating a traitorous, treasonous loser like Jefferson Davis and closing down state things to commemorate his birth in America? And the
They
answer is
think it's
yes.
history. Yes. They think that's
So
history and they fight for it.
understanding that, let's stay in that for a minute. They think it's history and they fight for it. Who's they? And what does that say to the rest of us who, as you mentioned, my ancestors were enslaved under that flag. My ancestors were, I mean, if it were up to Jefferson Davis, we would still be picking cotton or
Yeah.
tobacco or cane. What does that say that we live in a nation where there's somebody that's willing to stand behind you and sing he wished he was in the land of cotton? Look away.
I can't get that song out of my head either. But the they is, the white supremacist South. And people don't like to be called white supremacists. They don't like to be called racist. But then they support racism every day. The legislators of the South, they say, as goes the South, so goes the country, so goes the nation. And the South right now is a cesspool when you think about the legislation that's coming out against Black people, against LGBTQ people, against immigrants. And it's not just in our policy, it's in our structures. It's the schools that are named for these folks. Jefferson County is the most segregated county in Alabama. And now we have Jefferson Day. In Tennessee, we just stopped celebrating Nathan Bedford Forrest Day last year. Statues to Nathan Bedford Forrest and Jefferson Davis stood until 2 years ago, 2017, 2018, 4 years ago. And people don't want to have these conversations. They want us to be polite. They want us to act like we're all friends and that we can work across lines. But how do you in 2021 work with someone or appeal to the sensibility of someone who still sings Dixie and believes in the propriety of slavery?
Tell me who Nathan Bedford Forrest is. I live in Jersey. I'm from Jersey. I never heard of Nathan Bedford Forrest. I had to learn about, Robert E. Lee and Jefferson Davis, so I knew who they were. But you were standing in front of this monument or this park that was about to take down a statue, which is, and that was a construction worker. That guy, I believe, right? The one waving the Confederate flag. Was he a construction
He
worker? Or he
wasn't
just
even a construction worker. He runs a Confederate organization and was hanging
ah
out.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But Nathan Bedford Forrest, popularly, we know him as the namesake of Forrest Gump. But in real history, Nathan Bedford Forrest is the first Grand Wizard of the KKK and the Ku Klux Klan. And before that, he was a celebrated and still celebrated by many general of the Confederate Army. Before he was that general. He made millions of dollars off the sale of black bodies. He ran right behind me where I'm sitting in my commission office right now. He ran one of the most affluent slave markets in the South, right in downtown Memphis, Tennessee. And at one point even advertised that he had Frederick Douglass's daughter for sale to be a bedwench to a good white man. This is the man that people go on to make a hero and say he was a good Southern gentleman and cared for his people and cared for Black people. after slavery ended and after he was in charge of the massacre at Fort Pillow, which killed almost 600 African American Union soldiers. It was a massacre. It was not a strategic attack. They were shot in their head just to prove a point that Black people should not be fighting in the Civil War. He went on to be one of the first founders of a convict leasing farm, meaning the state of Tennessee paid him to re-enslave Black men who were arrested for acts of vagrancy, aka not having a job.
Sit with that 866-801-8255, because slavery ended, and then with the 13th Amendment they added a but clause, which I think they did that on purpose, right? They sat there and said, okay, but for incarceration. Then they created a system of laws for which primarily Black people would be found guilty of. So to be found guilty of not having a job after being enslaved, and then you're no longer enslaved, and who's going to hire you and pay you for something that they got for free, and loitering, not having a place to live, that was a crime. And oh, guess what? We incarcerate you and put you right back on the same plantations to do the same work you were doing before. And now I don't have to treat you well because you're not my property. And I can just rinse and repeat. Interesting. Okay. So that they put these names up, street names, school names, monuments, that too seems to be on purpose.
It is. It embeds them in our lexicon. It embeds them in our collective psyche. And we don't even know when we're like, I'm a proud graduate of Forest High. I live on Lee Road. You don't think twice about who that person is. And so then when there is resistance, people want to say, well, it's so tied to my history. I graduated from there. I lived on the street. I don't want to change it. And so it's really tough to make these things stick. In addition to getting the statues removed, we were able to get Forest Street renamed from Forest with 2 R's to 1 R. That's a very small block here in Memphis. And, but those little things matter because as a free Black woman, I should not have to drive down a street that I know was named for someone who would have sold and bred my body.
So that's the work primarily that you are focused on, in addition to the Legal Defense Fund for George Floyd in the Memphis branch of the NAACP. And some would say, this is not important. We are spending time. And, sometimes I vacillate because I'm like, is this the best use of our energy to take down monuments? Leave them up and let's put a plaque on it to tell people what this is. But you would tell me what, Tami?
The plaques are just as hard to get. And think about the monuments you visited and how often you've read the bottom, the fine print. And I think that more visibly, if we think about education and youth, the youth of my city have learned more about who Nathan Bedford Forrest was from the removal and the story and the history that'll be told about the removal than they ever would from a plaque sitting in the corner somewhere. And it's not the work completely, it's a portion of the work. Just like I fought against statues, I fight against policy every day as a county commissioner for equality for our people.
Help us to understand, and we're talking with Tami Sawyer. She is, of course, you can follow her at Tami Sawyer on the Twitters, and hey, TamiSawyer.com. You can go check her out, her website. I'm constantly reminding us that, there are people listening right now. There's something we can do besides flapping our gums, and there's something we can do besides being outraged. You decided to take your good government job and all of the trappings of DC and come back to Memphis and roll up your sleeves and get busy in a different kind of way. I just posted a petition to take Jefferson holiday, or, to let's move, next year. We should not have a Jefferson Alabama holiday. There should not be a state holiday. Sign the damn petition, even if you don't live there. How can we be effective? You talk about policy. There's so much. If I'm sitting at home, like, where do I put my attentions where I can be effective? And the collective is where we're the most effective. So what would you tell us, Tami?
I think collectively, there's if you're talking about the renaming and reclaiming of Southern history to be inclusive of the plight of Black people, there's a lot of organizations, There's the museum in Alabama, the Lynching Sites Project, and the Lynching Museum. There's a lot of Take 'em Downs. I led Take 'em Down 901. There's a Take 'em Down NOLA. There's a Take 'em Down Jacksonville, Take 'em Down Dallas. You can probably find a Confederate statue removal organization. Just look for the Take 'em Down and put your city or your area code in there. But I think it does go back to, the policy. I support the policy work of the Movement for Black Lives. I think that this is an inclusive part of that. And it even goes as far as, I'll throw it out there, statehood for DC. Why don't we want statehood for DC? Because DC is Chocolate City. It's not the people that you see on the Hill. It's the people who built that city and are still there. And so I think that we have to fight the structural inequalities and the policy as well. And so I would say people get tired of hearing it, but you've got to run for office, you've got to vote, and you've got to vote for people who are committed to not just going in and making sure the status quo continues to thrive. It's our time. It's about us.